Right. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Phil Anderson. I'm the CEO of the AFA, and I'm joined today by Sarah Aboud, the CEO of the FPA.
Welcome, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Great to do this as a joint webinar. It's the second time that we've had the opportunity to do this, but this is for a very important topic. In terms of the presentation today, all participants will be on mute throughout the session. However, we really want your questions. Now, the point of this slide is to reinforce the fact that we want you to use the Q&A button to put those questions in. Tanya Milnes will be helping with allocating questions and will be taking over as we get to the back end of this presentation to talk about the questions. So I'll hand over now to Sarah to go through the agenda.
Thanks a lot, Phil, and welcome again, everyone. We've been so pleased by the numbers for this webinar. We've got a lot of people really interested to hear what's happening next with the merger. So the focus of today, Phil and I are going to initially go through quite quickly the proposal itself, I guess a bit of a recap on why we're doing this and what exactly is proposed. We'll talk about where we've got to date because we've been in member consultation since the 1st of September. We wanted to share with you what's been happening and also a quick summary, I guess, of the feedback that Phil and I have both received from members so far. Then we'll talk about what happens next from here, and we'll go through what those key steps are and the timeline from here. However, we want to make sure, as Phil said, that we've got plenty of time for questions. So please do, as we're going through the content, put your questions into the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. And we want to make sure that we've got at least half of this webinar devoted to answering the questions that you have after we've been through the material. So looking forward to chatting. So I guess the first piece is a bit of a recap on the proposal itself. I'm sure many of you have seen plenty of the publicity. You've probably been to the various sessions and events that we've had so far. But I do think it's worth just reflecting on why are we doing this. And essentially there's two key benefits that we think are really critical for members. And the first one is creating a united voice for our profession. That's the key reason that we want to do this, and that is also one that I've found has really resonated with members across both associations, and also really hearteningly, it's resonated very strongly in Canberra and with the regulators that we've dealt with. They're very strongly supportive of the idea of having an association that represents the profession, that they believe can explain really, really well and clearly what is it that the profession wants and needs. So that is overwhelmingly and dominantly the key reason that we're doing it. And that's also been the one where feedback has been extremely strong for us on both sides, that that's something that our members really want to see. The second reason to do this is financial. By merging the resources of both of our associations, it puts us in a better position to support members. And that includes with things like events, supporting communities, supporting professional standards and all the things that we do as an association. It's no secret that the numbers in our profession have declined, and they've declined very substantially, particularly since 2019 when we peaked, down almost 45% now to be less than 16,000 planners. Now, while we believe that that will bottom out this year and we see the profession starting to grow again, there's no doubt that that's impacted both of our associations because our membership has dropped. Less than the profession has dropped, but it's still dropped, and that has a financial impact. I probably should acknowledge here there's been some publicity today because the FPA has released its financial results. The AFA has also released its financial results, and we both showed a deficit last financial year. Now, while in the case of both associations, it's not something to be terribly concerned about, both of us have strong reserves and will be around for some time to come to continue to support our members. Nevertheless, that's not a situation that either of us wants to see continue. I will just quickly speak to the FPA's results, I think, but I will save up more detail possibly for the Q&A if people have more questions on that. The deficit we reported was pretty substantial. It was close to 1.2 million. But it is important to note that that's primarily due to one-off factors that we don't expect to continue. Within that number was an almost $600,000 spend because the FPA upgraded all of its technology last year. We placed our CRM, placed our finance and our other systems. So that was a big one-off hit last financial year that we don't expect will continue, but will pay dividends for some time to come. There are also some other one-off impacts within those numbers, including COVID and a change of policy of the FPA to move to individual membership only. But I'm happy to talk to that more in the Q&A session if people are looking for some more detail. I think in summary, we don't believe that that will continue. We're confident we can turn that around, but nevertheless, we see bringing the two associations together as being a way we can ensure that there are more resources available to support members across the profession. I might pause on that, Phil, and turn over to you on the next couple of points.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. The two boards of the AFA and the FPA have been talking for the duration of this year in order to come together and put terms together for a merger. And there's been a number of key points of agreement. The objectives of both organisations are very similar and will continue to be very similar. It is about advocacy for members. It is about the establishment and the continuation of a profession and recognition of that profession. But in terms of the merger, there are some specific things that have been agreed to and were there as part of the discussion much earlier in the year. The first one is that there will be a new name, and that represents the fact that we're bringing together two organisations with different values, different history, and creating a new one, and that will most effectively be done through a new name. And we'll talk more about that new name in a moment. We've also agreed the representation on the board initially as the new entity comes together, should members approve the merger. And that means that there will be 8 former FPA directors on the board and 4 former AFA members on the board. We've also agreed in terms of professional designations that the go-forward professional designation will be the CFP. That reflects the fact that the number of CFP recipients is substantially more than the AFA's professional designation, the FCHFP and the CHLP, the Chartered Life Practitioner. But having made that decision to focus on the CFP as the go-forward designation, it does have international recognition. The point is that the boards remain committed to continuing to support and promote the AFA's professional designations. So those AFA members who have those professional designations will see that they will remain an important part of the new entity going forward. So as we move to the next slide, progress to date, we will talk about consultation that both entities have undertaken. First point from the AFA's perspective is we have done a roadshow going around the 5 mainland capital cities, having specific dedicated sessions to talk to members and seek their feedback. Sarah and myself have also been part of a roadshow in Tasmania where our members had the opportunity to contribute their thoughts. The AFA also had the merger as a very important topic for discussion at the recent AFA Thrive conference. And we had one session where we had the AFA's president, Sam Pereira, and David Sharp, the FPA chair, run a session seeking questions from the floor where we had really good engagement. And we also had a separate members-only session for AFA members to talk through the merger and to give them a chance to ask questions. The AFA has also had a members' consultation meeting in early September, and today obviously is the next step, which is a joint webinar. I'll pass over to Sarah to talk about the consultation work that the FPA has been doing.
Thanks, Bill. And look, it's been very similar on our side. We've done a number of events that are joint with the AFA, and Phil mentioned the Tasmanian Roadshow. We've had a separate webinar for FPA members. We also have an email address, which is still live and current, merger@fpa.com.au, where members have been sending in their questions and, in many cases, statements of support for the merger. So those feedback options still remain open, and consultation has been really pleasing so far. We've had a good deal of engagement from members. So I think that's probably the main thing from our side, Phil, and just moving into the next step, perhaps on some of the documents that we've been working on as well while the consultation has been ongoing.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And you make a good point that members can continue to provide input into the consultation process through a range of different mechanisms. One is the webinar today. Obviously, the FPA Congress will be another opportunity, but there is also emails, and we both have dedicated email addresses. The AFA has merger@afa.asn.au. Moving on to talk about the Constitution. The Constitution of any corporation is the most critical document. It defines some of the key elements of what that organisation exists for. So the Constitution of the new merged entity is a really important part of this process, and it will be refreshed. It won't be just the FPA's Constitution, and it will be a matter of consultation. Currently, both boards are working on that. And the Constitution is a really important document. It addresses things like what the objects of the organisation are. It talks to, at a high level, typically, the membership categories. It talks also to the composition of the board and the processes for the appointment of the board. It will inevitably address a range of other things that are relevant to the governance of an organisation. So things like how meetings are run and AGMs and so on. So this is a really important document for us to both work hard on and then reach agreement. But ultimately, the new Constitution will be something that will be put to members to approve and agree.
The other key document that we've been working on behind the scenes is the merger agreement. So this is the document that will give effect to what happens when the two associations come together. What are the critical elements of coming together that we're agreeing and that we want to ensure are protected through that merger process? That includes a recognition of kind of behind the scenes, how are we giving effect to this merger? What's the legal stuff? What's the tax stuff? And so on. And technically behind the scenes, the way we will achieve the merger is by rolling the AFA structures into the current FPA structure. It doesn't make sense, it's not efficient to set up entirely new structures for the new association. So that's the way this agreement is documented, that's the way we'll achieve it. But from the members' point of view, it's a merger. The other impact of that is, which we'll talk to more in a second, that technically the resolutions that each group of members will vote for are different because we're each coming to the new merged association via a different path. But effectively, both groups of members are voting on, do we want to merge? The other thing that's really important as part of these documents is what will the new association be called? And I've been really interested that with many members, that's the first question they ask me, what's the new name? It's really important to a lot of people. The new name is really symbolic, I think, of what we want to achieve and how we want to come together. So it's been clear to us that we need to involve members in the consultation specifically on what the new name is going to be, and we will be doing that.
Right, let's talk now about the feedback that we have received so far. And I'll kick off in terms of what the feedback has been from AFA members. The most important, I think, piece of feedback from AFA members is wanting to hold on to the sense of community that they believe that they get from being a member of the AFA. And we've got some specific communities in the AFA, including our Inspire community, which is a community for female advisors and other females from the profession. And that gives them a real sense of purpose and belonging. And we have a community leadership that works across the country in that respect. There's also the Gen X community, which is for younger advisors. And once again, that's a national community. So the feedback has been very strong about wanting to hold on to that sense of community and the culture of the AFA. And we've obviously been taking that feedback in our conversations with Sarah and the FPA board, and that's been recognised, and we're talking about forums that we can put in place to make sure we achieve that outcome. And we'll say more about that later on. Designations are also important. Obviously, AFA members who have done the FCHFP or the CHLP, it's an important part of their background, and it's something that they have devoted a lot of their time to achieve, and they want to make sure that they will continue to get recognition and support for that important professional designation. We've also talked about representation, and part of the feedback that we've got is from around the country is making sure that in each of the locations they have someone who they can talk to who's the conduit to the leadership and the board of the new merged entity. So that's important, that people have that sense that they are being represented and they have someone that they can talk to. Risk advisors is an important part of the legacy of the AFA. We have to recognise that it is a minority of AFA members are risk specialists, but it's an important part of our culture, and it's one that we will continue to advocate strongly for. At the moment, we have a paper from the Quality of Advice Review on conflicted REM and talking about the future of life insurance commissions, and both of our two entities will be working together to argue strongly for the retention of commissions in the life insurance space. Now, name is important, but it hasn't been a huge topic of discussion at the AFA, and I'm sure that our members will be keen to see the direction that the naming goes, and possibly have some input into the options that might be on the table. So I'll hand over to Sarah to talk about feedback from FPA members.
Sure, thanks, Bill. And from FPA members, the headings are quite similar, although the rank order is maybe a little bit different. As I alluded to earlier, in many cases, the first question members ask me on our side is, what will it be called? And they're making it clear that the name is really important to them. So that's certainly been very strong feedback from the FPA that we really need to get that right. Designations have also been a big topic for FPA members, in particular, wanting to know and be assured that the CFP will continue to be supported, continue to be the lead designation, and that is agreed between the associations, as Phil mentioned, that designation will continue to be open to new students and will continue to be the primary designation that we jointly support. As Phil mentioned, it is really important for everyone to understand that anyone who has a designation has put a lot of work into it, and we need to honour that and respect that. People who have the CHLP, people who have the FCHFP will continue to be recognised as holding those designations. What we won't be doing is enrolling new students into those designations. In terms of representation, that does come up quite often on our side, partly in terms of who does the FPA represent, and its corollary, who will the new association represent? And there have been changes, certainly on the FPA side, in quite recent times. So the financial year before last, the FPA made a decision to no longer have corporate memberships. So that was a program called the Professional Partners, and that was a program where some of the larger licensees, for example, had a membership level within the FPA. That's no longer the case. The FPA made a decision to only represent and have as members individual practitioners and their support staff. So that's the case with the FPA. It will be the case for the new association. It will unequivocally support practitioners and advisors and the profession. So I think that is important to understand. What else does it mean? The association will be a professional association. What does that mean? It means that we operate in the public interest. We don't see that as in any way being a conflict with supporting our members, because all of our members have exactly the same requirement. They must prioritise the best interests of their clients. So essentially, what's that saying? It's saying that this association will follow and recognise and support its members' obligations as well. So I think that's important to state. It does come up every so often. Certainly, if anyone wants to examine our financials, they're fully public. They're available to anyone who cares to take a look online, and you'll see that the revenue from the professional practices program was almost $400,000 in the previous financial year, and it went to zero this financial year. That doesn't mean that we're not going to have anything to do with these organisations. They're very important to our members, and it's important that we engage with them. There'll still be plenty of engagement in terms of support for events and so on. Where such support is offered, it's clearly disclosed to anyone who is attending an event that's had a sponsorship associated with it. So, and that's probably the main question I get on that one. For risk, it's very topical right now. As Phil mentioned, we've just had the paper on conflicted REM launch only a couple of days ago, and all of us have been beavering away on talking about what's important about this to our members, what do we need to ensure is carried into the quality of advice review, and working together as much as we possibly can to maximise the chance of our voice being heard. That will continue. The AFA and the FPA, for example, had a joint life task force for several years. That will continue. So I do want to reassure anyone who's practicing in that space that we see risk as an incredibly important part of someone's financial plan, and that support will absolutely be continued. So I might just polish off that by saying member consultation continues. You know, both Phil and I are getting calls, emails, and so on regularly, certainly on a daily basis. So we are still in that phase. That phase will continue for a little bit more. So we might turn to, I guess, what some of the next steps are. Sorry, it's getting a dry throat there. So what are the actual deliverables? What are the things that we're working on now? We've already spoken about the merger agreement itself. So what are the FPA and the AFA actually agreeing to do in order to come together? Phil also mentioned the constitution. It's been really clear to us that what we need is a new constitution for the new association. And that will be a brand new one that follows best practice for associations, but also recognises what's really important to the members of both associations who are coming together. That document will be part of the consultation, so members will see a draft of that document before we ask you to vote. The other thing that's come up is ACCC clearance. This is something that's relatively new. We believe it's a very low risk, but we do believe that it's prudent to seek a pre-clearance from the ACCC that it's okay for our two associations to come together to reassure that organisation that, you know, we're not destroying competition. There are still alternatives in the marketplace for financial advice associations. Because the way that we're coming together behind the scenes has a particular kind of structural imperative, I mentioned briefly earlier that the actual resolutions, what are each membership group actually voting on, are going to be a little bit different. But it is important that you bear in mind that essentially what you're voting on is yes or no, do we want to merge? But for the FPA members, the text of those resolutions will be, yes, we agree to change our name to X, and yes, we agree to adopt this new constitution. So those will be the two key elements of the vote that FPA members vote on. If 75% or more of people who vote yes to those, then from the FPA side, that would be a yes to the merger. And then Phil, from the AFA side, of course, the resolutions are slightly different, but the intent's the same.
Yes, Sarah. So from an AFA perspective, members will be voting to support the merger proposal. They will obviously be consulted on in terms of the name and the constitution, but it is a change to the name of the FPA and it is a change to the constitution of the FPA. So AFA members will not be voting on that directly, but obviously they have a chance to contribute to it and they have a chance to vote on whether they approve the merger as a whole. It's important to understand that all of these things need to be approved for this to eventuate. So all of the resolutions by each of the entities. The AFA will also necessarily have a resolution that needs to be passed with respect to the beneficiary of the AFA investment fund, which is a natural outcome of the merger happening. So more work will be done on refining those specific resolutions, and they will be made available to members in draft form a little later on, and we'll talk more about the next steps in a moment. All right, I'll start by emphasising the AFA's AGM, which is being held the week after next. We certainly encourage members to attend the AGM. We will be having a briefing for AFA members on the merger at the AGM. There will be no votes, obviously, with respect to the merger, but it will be an important part of our AGM agenda, as along with the other conventional matters that are part of an AGM.
And it's very similar on the FPA side. So members who have an entitlement to vote and come along to the AGM will have received their invitation and their notice of AGM earlier this week. That AGM will be on the 22nd of November. So similarly to Phil's comment about the AFA AGM, there'll be an update on the merger, but we're not voting on it at that particular annual general meeting. The next event we've got coming up is the FPA Professionals Congress on the 23rd to the 24th of November. Similarly to the offer the AFA made to FPA members to come along to their conference, we're really keen to extend that offer to AFA members as well. I'll show you in a sec, there's a specific code, but we're making the invitation to all AFA members who would like to come along to do so at the FPA member price. And we'd love to see as many of you there as can possibly make it. Hopefully it's going to be a great event. So the next thing that happens is what we're going to call the second round of consultation will open shortly after Congress. Most likely that'll be that last week of November, first week of December. And what happens then is the documents that we've alluded to earlier in this call will be sent to you as drafts. So that will include what's called an information memorandum, and that's a summary of the full merger agreement. So our members can see exactly what the key points are of that agreement, what's kind of happening behind the scenes between the associations. You will also see, as Phil alluded to before, the draft resolutions on each side and the constitution. We've mentioned that they're different for each side, but everyone will get an opportunity to see what they are. It's really important to our members that we get this right, and we don't want people to feel that they're being rushed or hurried into something without having the information that they need that's important to them, and be able to see and be reassured that the statements that we've made, the assertions that we've made, are in fact going to happen. So that's why we've decided to do this. If you don't want to worry about the detail or whatever, that's fine, but we do want to give members who are really interested in the detail and are really passionate about these things the opportunity to have their say. So we're also conscious at the time of year that it is kind of a Christmas break, and we kind of need a break in this profession. So we're giving 2 full months to that consultation phase. That will end at the end of January in 2023. And that's also when we're expecting to receive clearance from the ACCC that the merger can proceed. So during those 2 months of consultation, we'll be operating in a similar way to what we are now. We'll provide plenty of formal opportunities for people to have their say, but also via email, via phone call and so on. We're really keen to get your feedback on those drafts. So that takes us up to the end of January next year.
And then in early February, we will be publishing the final documents that will actually be voted on. The requirement is to issue them at least 21 days before the meeting, which is proposed to take place at the end of February next year. It will be done as an extraordinary general meeting for both entities, given that the AGM is taking place in November. Should the members decide to proceed with the merger, then we will, from that point onwards, go through a transition phase where we'll start to implement some of the changes that have been agreed as part of this merger, including name change, new constitution, new board, and transition of membership and staff from the AFA to the FPA. And the expectation is that by the 1st of July 2023, that transition will be complete and we'll be in a position to start the wind up of the AFA structures. So yeah, that's the proposed timeline from this point onwards. Obviously, there is a lot of work that has to be done. There's a lot of opportunity for engagement and consultation with members, but ultimately, when we get to the point of those EGMs, the decision will be in the hands of members to decide whether this proceeds or not.
I might just skip very quickly over this. It's an ad for Congress, so I just wanted to make sure people are aware how to do that. There's a discount code quoted on the screen, so you would register your attendance as a non-member, but use AFA 2022 as your discount code, and that's how you get the discounted member rate if you're an AFA member. You will shortly be getting an email backing all this up, so you'll have all that stuff in writing if that's something you're keen to do. But we might skip quickly over that. I think we're right on time, Phil, to start tackling Q&A.
We are, and this is the point that we bring Tanya into play, and we'll also stop sharing the screen so you can see Sarah, Tanya, and myself.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Sarah. Okay, we have a range of questions, but again, I would just reinforce what Phil and Sarah said before. Please use the Q&A if there are other questions that you would like to pose. I'll try and group the questions in logical order. So there are some questions here regarding the board structure. So there's you mentioned the 8 from the FPA and the 4 from the AFA. Are you able to provide any more details? And perhaps, Phil, if you'd like to take that one.
Yeah, I mean, that's the outcome. There are 4 from the AFA, 8 from the FPA. This was done on the basis of trying to reflect the relative sizes of the two entities. I think the AFA members can feel comfortable that the end outcome, a third of the directors being AFA legacy directors, it more than represents the contribution that the AFA will make to the ultimate membership of the merged entity. And I think that's important. The commitment has been for that those 4 AFA directors to have a transition term of 3 years. After that, they, like all eligible AFA members, will have the opportunity to stand for election to the new entity as a director. So I think that's probably all that we need to say on that point.
But the only thing I'd add to that is that board with that 8-4 is transitional. So the total number of directors will reduce to a kind of more normal number of directors after 3 years. But that is to ensure those additional directors are largely to ensure that the heritage of both associations is carried forward into the decision-making of the merged association.
There's also some questions here specifically related to voting. So there's a question around voting eligibility and also the timeframes to voting. For example, if people are on leave in February, are they still able to vote even if they're not around? So perhaps, Sarah, if you wouldn't mind taking that.
Yeah, so what we're looking at is rather than having everyone vote on a single day at an AGM and appoint proxies, what we're looking to EGM rather, what we're looking to do is open up voting and have it open for a period of time and enable people to vote remotely. So that the opportunities that you have are over the full month of February to either cast your vote as soon as you get the papers, or to nominate a proxy to vote on your behalf at the EGM, or to come along to the EGM. The EGMs on both sides are planned to be hybrid, so people can turn up in person, but of course, both our memberships are geographically pretty spread, so it's really important that we have that hybrid option. The other thing that Phil mentioned is the final documents will be issued probably towards the start of February, because it's important that people have time to see what the finals are and, you know, has their feedback been taken into account if they had any, and so on. So it's important that people have time to consider those documents. But yeah, if you're unsure whether you're a voting member or you believe that you're going to be out of contact, for example, for the whole of February, maybe without any remote connection, can you drop us a line and we'll see what we can do, because it is important that everyone has their voice heard. And I would hate anyone to feel that for some reason they couldn't vote. We really are keen to get as many members involved as humanly possible.
There's another question here. If a member of both associations, do they get to vote in both?
Yes, they do. I actually have had that a few times. Phil and I have put our heads together, and I think the best way to do it, we're having our EGMs. The plan at the moment is it would be on the same day, but at different times, and at times that are not horrendous for people in Western Australia, for example. We don't want anyone to have to get up at 6 a.m. or anything like that. So yes, that's the plan. If you're a member of both and you're a voting member of both, then you are absolutely able to vote in both.
And related to that, there's a question here of how many are members of both bodies?
Yeah, so we did some analysis back towards the start of consultation, and it was looking like somewhere between 400 and 500 at that time. It's easy to match for advisors who are on the FAR, but we also have some members who are individuals. They might be support staff, they might be paraplanners and so on. And we have to be pretty careful about privacy at this stage of our discussions. But yeah, we think it's somewhere between 400 and 500 are members of both associations right now.
Given that the FAR discloses membership, we can probably pick up from the FAR that there's a financial advisor register, that there's probably around 300 that have joint memberships, but we need to be conscious that it's not always kept up to date. Yeah,
and that's obviously talking about practitioners specifically. So the extra 100 odd is from people who are not listed on the FAR, but are nevertheless members. Yeah, for sure.
There's some questions here with regard to membership cost, and there's related to that is if you are currently between perhaps a calendar year with one association and a financial year with the other, are there any thoughts around what that might look like? So perhaps maybe, Sarah, I can get you to take the membership cost changes and Phil the other one around the transition period.
Okay, right. Yeah, so that's been a deep topic of conversation, particularly in recent weeks. What we want to achieve for members on both sides is that they're not paying more for an equivalent membership category in the merged association compared to what they were paying before. So we're going through the exercise of mapping the different membership types and the benefits that are accruing to those different types. And, you know, in each Heritage Association, FPA, AFA, what category do they go to in the merged association, and ensuring that that price point isn't higher. So we've got a strong degree of confidence that we're able to do that. We're still working through some of the specific categories. The current categories are very consistent across the two associations. So we're pretty confident that we're going to be able to achieve that. We're also looking at various discounts that people might have available to them in the various associations and ensuring that we're taking those into account. So that's our goal, that you won't pay more for the same services, if you like, in the new association compared to your current price. And then Phil, the aligning of years is a topic at the moment.
Yeah, and just on that issue of pricing, I think a lot of AFA members will be pleased to see a lower membership fee applies in the new association. On terms of merging or aligning the terms of membership, it is a challenge. The facts are that the FPA runs a 1 July to 30 June membership cycle, the AFA runs an anniversary of joining cycle, and that means that we have members who renew throughout the year. It does come to a peak in May and June and July, but we will have to work out how we get our members to transition to a 1 July to 30 June cycle. And that means that for those that have paid beyond the 1st of July next year, they will necessarily need to get a credit. For those who finish their membership period before the 1st of July next year, we will need to arrange for them to pay for that interim period, either as a standalone or in addition to the payment for the next year, 23-24. So that detailed work still needs to be done as to exactly how we're going to do this, and making sure that we do it as efficiently as possible. But members will be recognised for paying beyond the 1st of July, and they will get recognition of that through their renewal into the new association. Members will have the opportunity, obviously, to choose to join the new association, and that will pick that financial element up.
There's some questions here specifically related to CFP. So, for example, if someone is an ex-FPA CFP practitioner, they went to the AFA, are they able to get their CFP status back?
So there is the ability to reinstate as a CFP. The specifics around, for how long you haven't had that membership and so on might differ for different people. So we'd just encourage you to call and work through what your specific situation is and what's involved in reinstatement.
And Sarah, can you comment on what occurs for people who are completing their CFP study now?
So that they wouldn't be affected by this merger in any negative way. As Phil mentioned earlier, the CFP is a global designation. There are over 200,000 holders of this designation around the world, and we're part of the Financial Planning Standards Board, which is headquartered in the US, and they have the copyright, if you like. They license us to be able to offer the designation in Australia. So we're in dialogue with them. They're aware of what's planned, and the intent is that the new association inherits that ability to continue to offer the designation. So that should be smooth, and anything that's kind of complex at a detail level happens behind the scenes, and we would not expect that to affect students.
Can you comment on how the two foundations will be amalgamated for the new organisations, or the two charities or charitable foundations?
So the AFA has a foundation that's run within the AFA, and the FPA has a separate organisation, Association with Future 2, which has a separate board, and it's a separate organisation. So when we look at the AFA side, that foundation will look to wind up, and it needs to find an equivalent charity that it believes has similar objects and purposes that it believes is the appropriate successor charity. Now that could be Future 2, it could be another charity, but they're in discussions working out what happens with that foundation. Phil, did you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, the point that I would make is that the AFA Foundation has been an important part of the AFA over the last 14 years, and we do have to resolve it. Should the members choose to merge, it does need to be changed because the trustee of the AFA Foundation is the AFA. So that trustee will no longer exist. So we will be working with the committee that runs the AFA Foundation to look at what the right outcome is going forward. But certainly one of the options is to roll the funds into Future 2, and for some of the people who have been involved with the AFA Foundation to get involved with Future 2 as well.
In a similar theme, can you comment on how the various service awards and other recognitions of achievement will be harmonised?
I guess the first point to make is that existing standards will continue. So if someone is a life member, for example, of the AFA or the FPA, that's recognised in the new association. They're a holder of a Distinguished Service Award or some similar recognition, that will continue to be recognised in the new association. In terms of awards, our goal is to harmonise them. So I had a great time actually at the AFA conference when the awards were made at the gala black tie dinner. It was fabulous, and the feeling in the room was so great. There was so much joy and recognition of what great advice looks like. You know, on the FPA side, we also have awards, but essentially we absolutely intend to continue celebrating great advice. And we want to make sure that the awards that are important on both sides are continued in the new association.
I might just add to that the Female Excellence in Advice Award that we have run for the last 11 years, it's open to nominations from across the profession. And we do get a lot of FPA members who choose to nominate for that award, and they absolutely value it. So I think it is a bit unique in that sense, and we have got the feedback very strongly from the past winners and the current year applicants that they would want to see that award continue. So that feedback has absolutely been taken on board.
Are you able to comment on what the conduct review commission arrangements would be going forward in the merged association? Maybe Sarah, if you could take that.
Yeah, I'm happy to pick that up. So the FPA has a separate discipline organised or association, if you like, called the Conduct Review Commission. Anyone who's got any questions, by the way, about the FPA's current code or disciplinary regs, it's all on our website. So you can go have a look in there as to exactly how we work on complaints, what happens if a member has a complaint laid against them, what recourse they might have. We also publish the results of all determinations. So you can go have a look in there and see what could happen. The CRC is independent because we want to ensure that due process is maintained. While we fund it, it's not terrifically expensive, but it does have a senior counsel leading it and a number of lawyers who hear complaints where the FPA's internal investigations believe that there's a case to answer. And you know, so the consequences could be just you need to leave the association, up to potentially a fine. Fines are very rare. We only issued one last year, for example, and they're only imposed when we believe that the conduct that a member might have displayed is just so egregious that it would not be right for effectively other members of the association to be funding the costs of the hearing. So that gives you a bit of an example of how rare that is, but also that it can be done. We changed our code in September of this year. It was previously a relatively long document that's been pulled back to a single page, which outlines the principles on which we believe FPA members want to come together and the standards which we hold each other to. The next stage for us is to review the disciplinary regs. That's already in the calendar, and that's something that we're engaging with the AFA about too, because that will most likely flow through into the new association. I might pause it there, but I'm always happy to answer questions. I get questions every so often from members about it. As I said, we're completely transparent about it. So if a member has any concerns or questions, I'm always happy to answer them. I can't usually answer questions about current cases though. We actually don't have very many, but where they're in train, it's important that we respect confidentiality. And I can only talk about specific cases once a determination's been made. But as I said, you know, happy to answer questions about it in principle.
There's a couple of questions here relating to what happens if the merger is not successful. So if it doesn't get a positive vote, what are the next steps from there?
Well, I think the answer to that is that both of the organisations will continue on in their separate capacity, and we will have to do our very best to achieve the objectives that we want to achieve in terms of advocacy and in terms of our business models and our viability. Obviously, we'll need to do what we can to make sure that we can continue to operate in a viable manner. It means that we won't achieve the synergies and scale of economy that we otherwise would have got as a merged entity.
Look, I guess, fully agree with Phil. We really believe that a merger is in the best interests of both our members. So we're doing everything we possibly can to give that merger the best chance of success and to ensure that it can be done in a way that our members support. But if ultimately our members tell us that they don't want to do that, then we'll need to continue as separate organisations, and that's what we'll do.
There's some feedback in the channel around how the selecting of the name may honour the heritage and continue to uphold the reputation of both associations. Are you able to comment on that process?
Well, I mean, that's exactly the reason I think why the name is so important to people. And I've had so many suggestions for new names already, and Phil, I know you have as well. A lot of them are around, various combinations of Australia Association, Planner and Advisor. And many members' minds seem to be tending that way, that they feel the new name is probably almost some mix of the current two names. That may very well be the outcome. But because it is so important to people, what we're going to do is enlist some help on this. We're not going to go to town. We're not going to spend millions of dollars rebranding or anything of that nature. I don't think that'd be appropriate. But I think we do need an organisation to help us structure that debate. Members will be involved in that consultation. So exactly what that involvement form will take, we're not quite sure yet. We're working through some organisations and getting them to sharpen their pencil a bit in terms of their quotes at the moment. But the goal is there'll be some involvement initially in getting a sense across the membership bases, what's important to them about the name, what do they want it to symbolise and represent, and then an organisation, a marketing sort of branding specialist will come back to us with some options to consider. So that's the plan at the moment. But yeah, I think the main thing is to reassure members that you will definitely be involved very directly in that consultation.
There's a couple of questions that have come through around merging with other organisations in the futures, such as SMSFA has been mentioned a couple of times.
Well, I guess this is the merger that we're focusing on right now. We think this merger is the one that is going to deliver great benefits to members on both sides and is achievable in the current financial year. And that's where our focus is right now. I guess I wouldn't want to speculate too much on other mergers. It's got to be, from both sides, be seen as something that is really important and will really add value to both members. That's a high hurdle to jump. So I think it's important for us to really focus on this one right now and make sure this one is successful and it's delivering to members. I guess that's where my head's at the moment. But Phil, did you want to add?
I would add that the AFA and the FPA are the two largest financial advice associations in terms of advisors on the Financial Advisor Register, and they are pure advice associations. We need to be cognizant of the fact that other associations either are big players in the accounting space, and in the case of the SMSF Association, they also have a range of other members such as SMSF auditors and so on, and accountants as a key part. So this is the two largest associations, and they are both very focused in the advice space.
There's a question here regarding the combined position of both associations around the tertiary education requirements for new financial advisors. Are you able to comment on recent proposals from Treasury around, the requirements to study core areas, perhaps outside of the experienced pathway proposal, but more around the new advisors joining the profession?
I'm happy to jump in on that one, Tanya. We have said that we are supportive of increased flexibility, but we do believe that there should be a core knowledge component that must be completed by all new entrants. And we're not convinced that the 5 knowledge areas that were specified in that consultation paper are adequate. So it's an area that I think it needs more work, because we do want to ensure greater flexibility to enable more new entrants to come into the advice profession, but there needs to be a very solid foundation, and thus we do need to move a little away from where we are now, but not necessarily to the point that's been proposed.
There's a question here around existing committees of each association. Would they be restructured immediately if the merger proceeds?
I mean, I can start that off and then maybe toss that one to you, Phil. One of the points Phil made earlier that has relevance to committees is the intent or the desire to focus on, have a particular committee that focuses on ensuring the heritage of both membership organisations is continued. So in one sense, yes, I mean, that's an additional committee that we're looking at potentially adding to the list. The new board will absolutely be looking at the membership and focus of all of the existing committees. There's quite a few on both sides. And with the coming together of the boards, then we need to look at how do the committees come together and how are they represented. So that would be an early focus of the new board post a vote, in the event that the vote is yes. But Phil, I mean, do you want to add from your side any particular committee focuses that you've got in mind?
Sure. If that question is coming from the AFA, it might be reflective of the fact that we have state committees and we have communities of interest committees, or communities of practice committees. And one of them is geographically based. The other one is, and it's a matrix structure, is based upon the community that they want to belong to, whether that's the Inspire female community or Gen X community for younger advisors. Now, I think we will want to ensure, on the FPA side, there's the chapter structure as well. So we'll want to ensure that we bring those two together so that we do have that geographical based committee. And we've got to recognise the real importance of local communities and committees in making the community work, in making events happen, in pulling people together. So we don't want to lose that. So we'll have to work hard to ensure that we bring those different geographical committees together. And we'll need to make sure that we preserve the community of practice type groups that go across the country. So as Sarah talked to, we've recognised that we need to put a board committee in place with the primary objective of making sure that we preserve the community and culture of the two organisations, and we make that coming together as seamless as possible.
And I know, Phil, you touched on this earlier, but perhaps you could also just add some further detail around the women in finance related events and programs in a merged association.
So I think that both organisations celebrate International Women's Day, for example. What the AFA has is the Inspire community, which is, it's not exclusively females, because we do encourage males to participate, but it has a purpose of wanting to encourage more females to get into advice, and also to encourage more females to get advice. So it does provide a really important purpose as we continue to work towards getting greater gender diversity across the advice profession. So that's something that is strongly supported within the AFA community, and I think the goals of it would equally be strongly supported within the FPA community. It's something that I think we all have motives to ensure that we can as we come together, preserve that as an initiative that we want to carry forward.
Okay, there's some great comments coming through with providing feedback on names. But perhaps there's a question here related to, is there a way to determine the relative size of the various associations in the financial services space to give some relevance to the merged association membership numbers in relation to advocacy?
So I'll try and pick that one up. I'm not sure if I'm getting the full sense of it, but the relative size of the associations is usually determined by the membership numbers. And that's what we've based our proposed split in terms of governance and at board level on. What we're also looking at is perhaps where that question tends is what proportion of the FAR would the merged association represent? And that's something that we're looking at as well. Obviously, members have the choice to join the merged association. So we believe that we will have a strong majority of practitioners post the merger, but we won't be able to know that for sure clearly until the transition is complete. I'm not sure if I've entirely got the sense of it though. So I should just add, by the way, everyone, that if you've asked a question and we don't get to it today, it won't be lost. We can still kind of see what those questions are and ensure that if we can't answer them, don't get to them in this forum, we will answer them in another way, because I'd had anyone to feel that they had a question that they couldn't get answered.
And Tanya, we are at time, but we still have nearly 300 people on the line. So I think we're both happy to stay for a few more minutes, maybe to pick up some more questions. I think to answer the question, the relative size of the organisations, the FPA has over 10,000 members. And if we look at the published annual report, I don't know the exact number. I know it's over 10,000 as at 30 June 2022. The AFA reported a little over 3,200 members. So the FPA is materially larger than the AFA and obviously all the other stakeholders in the advice sector.
There's a question here relating to what consideration has been made with regard to increasing the appeal of the profession for younger people coming through the schools and university systems.
I mean, that's a critical element in what both associations are keen to do. We both have strong programs in place to support students, to encourage students to come into the profession, to promote the profession to prospective new students. And we're also increasingly focusing on the professional year and on mentoring programs. So there's a lot that both associations are currently doing separately, and I think we can be even more effective if we're combining our resources and doing that together. We're really hungry for more great financial planners, and I think the new association is going to be able to very effectively promote this profession and ensure that students are considering it and understand just what a great profession it can be and a great future for people coming into the profession, particularly right now.
Okay, I'm just trying to make sure if there's any major themes that we haven't covered off. Perhaps if you can just, for those that might have joined the call later, just touch on again how the merged association is looking to represent the interest of members going forward, who they're representing.
Yeah, sure. So what we've covered off is that both associations have a focus on individual members. We talked about how the FPA previously had a professional partner program that's been discontinued. So both associations are focused on individual members, and the new association be a professional association that represents the interests of the public and its members, who are primarily financial planning practitioners. That is very important for us to be clear on, and very important for anyone to understand that's the goal of the association. So was there any more nuance to that, Tanya, or just a general question about who do we represent? We represent financial planners and advisors.
There is a overlay there around being a risk specialist and an emerged association. How do we make sure that we're representing the interests of all of the specializations within the profession?
Sure.
I'd be happy to add to say that this has been discussed extensively, and it's been one of the points that the AFA has repeatedly made is the importance of continuing advocacy for the risk space. And the recognition is absolutely there. The recognition that in answering the needs of clients, risk is an important part of it, whether that's done directly by the advisor or it's outsourced to someone who can meet those needs. Risk is an important part, and it won't be forgotten. It will remain a focus. And as Sarah said, we have a joint task force that is inclusive of the leadership of both entities, plus selected risk advisors from both entities. And that makes us very focused on the risk-related issues. We have a meeting of that task force only at the start of next week to talk about the recently released Quality of Advice Review conflicted REM paper.
It's like a more technical one here, perhaps, in terms of those AFA members who hold the FCH-FP. Will that transfer across to CFP?
So our team at the moment are doing the work on mapping the content of the FCH-FP to the CFP, and there is a fair bit of overlap. So what we're working on is making sure that people who hold that designation and are interested in CFP, that they're very clear on what additional study or additional requirements might be if they wanted to move to CFP. And there is a lot of overlap between the two. The FCH-FP, traditionally where they're different is the FCH-FP has had a stronger focus on practice management and if you like, the business of advice as well as the technical side of advice, where the CFP focuses more deeply. But as I said, there is a lot of overlap that is being mapped now under the recognition of prior learning guidelines. So we'll be able to share the outcomes of that, I'm hoping, quite soon with people who hold that designation, if that's something that they're keen to do.
Okay, and I think so there's a question here with regards to is it a government position to allow advisors to not be a member of an association? Perhaps Phil, maybe, or Sarah?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one. That the government does not have a position to mandate membership of professional associations. That was something that the former government decided some 5 or 6 years ago as the work was done on the professional standards regime. We're conscious that a coalition government is going to avoid compulsory membership of any group. What we would hope, though, is that the value that we offer our members addresses their needs, and thus, whilst it wouldn't be mandatory, it'd be something that the vast majority would choose to do. And I think that's what the other professions aim to achieve as well.
Okay, and perhaps maybe just there's one last question with regard to the board composition. Are you able to comment on how the individual directors would be selected from each association?
Well, I'll answer that from the perspective of the AFA. It will be the current board of the AFA that selects the 4 directors who would go onto the merged entity.
And from the FPA side, both associations have just been through a director election cycle, and we'll have 8 directors as a result of that cycle who will come across to the board of the merged entity. We've delayed appointing an additional director, partly in anticipation of this. So that's the outcome. The additional directors who were elected in the last cycle, plus the current directors, will come across to the new board.
Okay, I think we may have addressed the key themes that are coming through. And as you say, if I've missed any specific questions, we'll be able to go back and address those directly as well. But I think I've got them all.
All right.
Well, Tanya, I might just quickly wrap it up saying there will be a recording of the webinar today that's made available for people to go back and have a look at, and for those who weren't able to attend to be able to access it. And that will be made available by both the associations. Participants today will get an email to confirm their participation. But once again, we remind you that the consultation process is ongoing, and you can access both organisations through the email addresses that we have available. If you have any more questions, we will carefully review the questions that have been asked today and answered today to see if there's anything more that we do need to address. But this is an important part of the process, and we welcome your continuing participation. So that's a thank you from me. Over to you, Sarah.
Just wanted to add my thanks to everyone who's come along today. It was a really strong turnout, and clearly this is a critically important issue for both associations. I guess I just would like to close on our belief, the belief of both boards of these two associations, that a merger is very much in the interests of both of our members. We believe it will give us a very strong ability to advocate on your behalf. And that is the thing that most members raise with me as most important to them about their association. You want strong, bold advocacy. You need to see changes, and we believe this merger will give us the best possible opportunity to do that and to be effective. Just echoing Phil, I really want to thank you for your involvement and participation in this. It's a really important strategic change that we're proposing for the associations. And I really do want every member to feel that they've had the opportunity to have their say and to have their feedback heard as part of this process. So thank you again, and looking forward to the next stage.
Thank you.